Everything that you desire to have within relationships, you already have. Everything that you want to be within your relationships, you already are. You say, Kevin, how is that possible? I don't experience that within my relationships. Well, the reason why is because we're interfering with the genuine and natural free flow of love in our lives. And I'm going to explain today how exactly we do that. Now, do you know that studies have shown that the more choices that you are given within this world, the less likely you are to actually make a decision? Now, I experienced this recently when I was trying to pick out a dentist. I had literally hundreds of dentists to choose from in South Florida. And I got so frustrated with it, I just texted my friends and said, you guys know a good dentist. Because I was so frustrated by the fact that there were so many choices out there. Has anybody ever had this experience? All right. Now, thankfully, we don't have several choices that we're going to have to choose between this evening. We only have two choices in the metaphysical realm and the spiritual realm that we ever have to choose between at any given time. Does anybody know what those choices are?
Love or fear.
The choice between love or fear. Two choices, two voices that we are listening to at any given time in the day. Now, what is fear? Let's talk about the premise of fear. Does anybody know what fear, the acronym for fear is? Come on.
False evidence appearing real.
False evidence appearing real. As I said here previously, everything in our relationships that we want, all the love we want to experience is here. The only thing that gets in the way from us experiencing that is those dark spots of fear that we see between ourselves and our brothers and sisters. Do you know that, my friends, love does not stop being loving just because we're afraid? That peace doesn't stop being peaceful just because we have an internal conflict. But I'm reminded of the phrase 20 years ago when I was introduced to A Course in Miracles. After a psychiatrist, meeting with a psychiatrist, he introduced me to A Course in Miracles. And I opened up that book and it said, this is A Course in Miracles. It is a required course. Only the time that you take it is voluntary. This course does not aim at teaching the meaning of love, for that is beyond what can be taught. It does aim, however, at removing the blocks to the awareness of love's presence, which is your natural inheritance. This course can therefore be summed up very simply in this way. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. And when we're talking about reality and unreality, we're talking about the reality of love and the illusory nature of the fear that seemingly stands in front of it. So, where did this fear come from? Anybody want to take a stab at it?
From separation.
Exactly. The fear came from our belief in the separation. In the belief that we are separate from God and that we are separate from our brothers and sisters. Let me give you an example. Let's say, and the Course uses this example as well, the sunbeam and the wave. That there's this little bitty sunbeam that thinks it is separate from the sun. And this little wave in the ocean thinks it is separate from the ocean. And the Course tells us that no matter how hard this little wave and this little sunbeam of light try to declare their separateness from their source, does it make any whit of difference at all? No. They are still one with their source. And that's what the Course says with our dynamic with God. God is cause, we are an effect of that cause. And we could never be more separate from God or from our brothers than that little wave can be from the ocean or that little sunbeam from the sun. We are to God like fish are to the ocean, the God of love. Wherever we're going in this ocean of love, we are experiencing the presence of God wherever we go. The only thing preventing us from experiencing less than the love of God is once again our interference. Now we talked about fear Anybody know what the voice of fear is called? The ego. The ego is nothing more than an acronym for edging God out. The first question that the ego has ever asked you is, what are you? And the ego has never been able to answer that question since. And the ego is nothing more than this: a compilation of all of your self-concepts about yourself. And part of this journey will be looking at what those self-concepts are and begin to raise them to question within your life. Because once you begin to raise them to question, you begin to see the level of their insanity and what they're actually covering up, your true identity. The range of the ego is from suspiciousness to viciousness. That's all it knows. At one point it's suspicious, but when it gets upset and angry, it runs to the level of viciousness. Hello? Y'all with me on this?
Yeah.
Okay. Getting all quiet on me. So, what is the voice for love then? The voice for love is that voice that reminds you of your true identity as a child of the light and a child of the day. It's constantly reminding you of it. The Course tells us that God speaks to you through this voice, but you do not hear it because you are too preoccupied with your own voice, the voice that you made up to replace the voice that God gave you. Does this make sense? Is everyone with me? Say yes.
Yes.
So the ego then, this voice of fear, is constantly looking to the temporal nature of what is outside of us in order to, because that's all it resonates with. It's always looking to time. That voice of love is always looking to the eternal nature of love that lives within you and that lives within me. You say, Kevin, but how can I tell the difference between love and fear? How can I tell the difference between the voice of love and the voice of fear, the voice of the ego? It's very simple. The ego always speaks first and always speaks loudest. Why? Anyone?
Doesn't want you to find out it's got something going on.
It doesn't want you to know that the reason why it speaks loudest is because it has much to defend, and what it has to defend is weak. Now, the reason why it speaks first is because it doesn't want you to hear the voice of love that lies just underneath it. And again, the voice of love is a still, small voice, and we're not going to hear that voice of love unless we learn to discipline our mind and quiet our thoughts and settle ourselves, and as the Tao Te Ching says, stop thinking and end your problems. What difference between yes and no? What difference between success and failure? Must you value what others value and avoid what others avoid? Now, the fundamental, for us to really grasp the nature of the dynamic of fear and the dynamic of love, we need to understand what the fundamental law of perception is. The fundamental law of perception is this: you will see what you believe to be there, and you will believe it to be there because you want it to be there. You see, the ego wants you to think that your thinking is not having any consequence in your life, that what matters in your life is your behavior. And so that voice of fear is constantly trying to correct your missteps by correcting your behavior, by guilting you and so forth. But what we do here in this dynamic is completely opposite of that. In fact, everything that the voice of fear presents to you as being true is the exact opposite of the truth. Everyone say to me, only the truth is true and nothing else is true. Say that with me. Only the truth is true and nothing else is true. How powerful are your thoughts? I'll tell you how powerful they are. Every thought that you think creates something on some level within your experience. Every thought that you think creates something on some level in your experience. You know, Einstein once said that the most important question you could ever ask is this a friendly universe? Is this a friendly universe? Why did he think that that was such an important question? I'll tell you why. Because if we perceive through our thinking that the universe is an evil entity out to get us, then that's what our experience will become. But if instead we see the universe and God as a benevolent force, a benevolent being who's out to protect us, to guide us, to direct us, then that is what our experiences will become. We're not out here to change the world, we're out here to change our minds about the world. And guess what? We're not out here to change our relationships either. We're out here to change our mind about our relationships. Why? Because the world is nothing but an outward picture of an inward condition. And as that inward condition changes, we begin to see that the outward picture changes accordingly. Is everyone with me?
Yes.
Bonus. All right. Now, this book is called, that we're talking about, A Course in Miracles. And we're not talking about the kind of miracles that is thrown around on the TV, walking on water and so forth. Things that try to happen to produce an effect. That's not what we're talking about. The definition of a miracle is this, and if you're taking notes, write this down. The definition of a miracle is this: a shift in your perspective and your perception from a fearful way of looking at something to a loving way of looking at something. Again, all we are talking about here in our spiritual experience is two choices, two voices, the voice of love and the voice of fear that is trying to replace it. And the miracle says this: your mind is so powerful that if you shift your perception and your perspectives from a fearful way of looking at something to a loving way of looking at something, then obviously it's going to have an outward effect.